Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our event this afternoon, where we're going to focus on moving agri-food from Poland to GB. We have a number of presentations for you this afternoon, but we'd like your help, please. We'd like you to log into Slido and tell us about how ready you are for import controls in GB. So as we warm up for the event, if you could log on to www.slido on your browser or your phone and put in the hashtag BPDG, where we have 3 questions during the course of this event for you, and we're grateful for you completing those. Thank you. Next slide, please. As I said, we've got a full agenda for you this afternoon about moving food and drink from Poland into GB, and please do ask us questions in the Q&A bar at the top of your screen. We have a number of officials from Poland and GB today that will help to answer those questions towards the end of the webinar. And after this webinar, we will publish a recording of the event, so you can go back over it or share it with those in your supply chain. We will share the slides that we've used with all of you who have registered for the event, and we will be collating all of your questions and sending out an answer to those. On the next slide, we have an outline of our agenda. So that's probably enough from me. I am delighted now to hand over to James Hughes, who's our Minister Consular for Economic Affairs at the British Embassy in Poland, and to Robert Piłat, the Deputy Director of International Cooperation at the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development. James, if I can hand to you first. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Margaret. It's a great pleasure to be here as part of a British-Polish governmental double act to introduce this afternoon's session. And in a moment we'll hear from Robert, but from the British Embassy perspective, it's fantastic that you're all able to join us this afternoon, or indeed watching this back afterwards, and this dedicated session for our colleagues and partners in the agri-food sector. The UK, as you know, places huge importance on our trade and investment relationship with Poland. And as representatives of the agri-food sector, you will know that agri-food is an especially important element of that trade and investment relationship. As you know very well, just before Christmas last year, the UK agreed our trade and cooperation agreement with the European Union. And the deal, the trade and cooperation agreement, maintains 0 tariffs and 0 quotas on trading goods between the United Kingdom and the European Union. And this is the first time that the European Union has ever agreed complete tariff-free, quota-free access in a free trade agreement. It provides for streamlined customs arrangements, including recognising our respective trusted trader schemes to support the flow of goods at the border and reduce administrative costs for traders. It provides for ongoing cooperation regarding public, animal and plant health, and to limit technical barriers to trade. However, as you also all know, the UK left the customs union and the single market at the end of the transition period at the end of December last year. And as a result, some changes were introduced from January 2021 to customs and other import controls. And many of you will have been involved in sessions that we and our colleagues from the Border and Protocol Delivery Group will have put on and organised over the past months about some of those earlier changes. And since January this year, Poland and other EU member states have been applying the EU Customs Code on trade with the UK. And we on the UK side have also put some of our own controls into place. But the groundwork that we laid in preparation for the end of the transition period has helped to mitigate disruption so far. We have not seen anything like the disruption at ports that many predicted, and supply chains have shown themselves to be robust. But since we set the timetable to introduce full import controls by July 2021, there have been further restrictions and lockdowns, and the impact of the pandemic has been clear for us all, both in the United Kingdom and in Poland. And many businesses have not therefore had the time and the resources to make the necessary preparations, and they are therefore less ready than they would have been. And so we decided on the British government side to introduce further import controls in a phased approach. and this was our pragmatic attempt to give businesses and the broader industry more time to adapt. So further changes are therefore coming on the British government side, and you will hear more about those in the remainder of this session from our team of experts. And so it's important for businesses to continue to invest that time and resource to prepare for those additional changes to UK import controls, which are scheduled for October and for January. And this is particularly the case, of course, for businesses in agri-food, which is why we're having this session today, dedicated for questions and comments and to help you as you prepare for those changes. This is part of a concerted effort we have been making along with our partners in the Polish government to help businesses prepare and adapt to our new terms of trade. We have an excellent range of expert speakers this afternoon, so at that point I will stop. I would simply encourage all of you joining us this afternoon to ask questions. There is no question too small. Please ask those questions. As Margaret has just said, we will make sure that every question is answered, whether in the session or if time means that we can't answer the question straight away, we will of course answer it as soon as possible thereafter. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to my double act partner and to Director Robert Pilat from the Ministry of Agriculture. Robert, over to you.
Thank you, James. Thank you very much. Just a quick thank you in English. Thank you, to your whole team. Thank you for the experts on the British side for participating and for the excellent cooperation we have so far. Now let me switch to Polish. Szanowni Państwo, witam Państwa wszystkich serdecznie i pragnę na początku podziękować ambasadzie brytyjskiej za zorganizowanie dzisiejszego webinarium i udział ekspertów ze strony brytyjskiej oraz polskiej. Jest to kolejna cenna inicjatywa, przy której Ministerstwo Rolnictwa i Rozwoju Wsi ma przyjemność współpracować z partnerami brytyjskimi. Jak Państwo wiecie, wyjście Zjednoczonego Królestwa Wielkiej Brytanii i Irlandii Północnej z Unii Europejskiej wprowadziło wiele istotnych zmian dla przedsiębiorców branży rolno-spożywczej w krajach Unii Europejskiej, w tym także w Polsce. Od 1 stycznia 2021 roku relacje handlowe Unii Europejskiej z Wielką Brytanią regulowane są zasadami, jakie stosowane są wobec krajów trzecich. Na chwilę obecną nie mamy sygnałów od przedsiębiorców na temat trudności w stosowaniu nowych wymogów i procedur kontroli granicznej w handlu między Unią Europejską a Wielką Brytanią. Mimo uniknięcia czarnego scenariusza, odnotowujemy jednak pewien spadek wartości polsko-brytyjskich obrotów handlowych produktami rolno-spożywczymi, co może stanowić pewien niepokojący sygnał. Aby powstrzymać ten niepokojący i niepożądany kierunek wymiany handlowej, ważne jest, aby przedsiębiorcy zaangażowani w handel ze Zjednoczonym Królestwem byli przygotowani na kolejne obowiązki i wymogi formalne, które będą musieli spełnić. To dotyczy również administracji naszych państw. Dlatego od dłuższego czasu polska administracja prowadzi działania informacyjne na ten temat. Mam tu na myśli m.in. specjalną stronę internetową brexit.gov.pl prowadzoną przez Ministerstwo Rozwoju, a także dedykowaną skrzynkę pocztową, na którą można przysyłać pytania dotyczące zarówno wymiany handlowej, jak i np. przewozu zwierząt domowych. Działania informacyjne prowadzimy także w Ministerstwie Rolnictwa i Rozwoju Wsi wraz z jednostkami nadzorowanymi, takimi jak Główny Inspektorat Weterynarii, Główny Inspektorat Ochrony Roślin i Nasiennictwa, Główny Inspektorat Jakości Handlowej Artykułów Rolno-Spożywczych, a także Krajowy Ośrodek Wsparcia Rolnictwa. Chciałbym serdecznie podziękować kolegom i koleżankom z tych instytucji za bardzo dobrą współpracę w tym zakresie. Na naszych stronach internetowych publikujemy informacje dotyczące kolejnych etapów wdrażania przez Wielką Brytanię procedur handlu towarami rolno-spożywczymi. Korzystając z okazji, zachęcam Państwa do regularnego odwiedzania naszej strony w celu zapoznawania się z tymi informacjami. Dziś wspólnie z ambasadą brytyjską w Warszawie zorganizowaliśmy dla Państwa to specjalne spotkanie informacyjne w formie webinarium. Dzięki tej formule możemy dotrzeć do szerszego grona odbiorców bez konieczności przemieszczania się, co jest dość istotne w ostatnim czasie. Mam nadzieję, że oprócz informacji od naszych ekspertów które będą Państwo mogli dziś usłyszeć. Spotkanie to będzie także świetną okazją do zadawania pytań w kontekście zmian wdrażanych przez stronę brytyjską i wyjaśnienia ewentualnych wątpliwości. Zależy nam bardzo na utrzymaniu jak największej płynności wymiany handlowej z tak ważnym dla Polski partnerem, jakim jest Wielka Brytania. Dlatego też chcemy, żebyśmy wszyscy byli odpowiednio przygotowani na kolejne zmiany, które wejdą w życie w relacjach handlowych ze Zjednoczonym Królestwem niebawem, bo już od 1 października bieżącego roku. Mam nadzieję, że informacje, które zostaną tu dziś przekazane, będą dla Państwa przydatne i pozwolą lepiej przygotować się na planowane zmiany. Dziękuję Państwu bardzo.
Thank you very much, James and Robert, for opening the session for us. And now if we could have the next slide, please. This is a reminder that, and sorry, on to the next slide, please, Kathleen. Thank you. There's a reminder that we have our first question up on Slido. So thank you for those of you who've logged in so far. And if the rest of you could take the time to do so, that would be lovely. We'd like to understand how you have found it to move goods between the EU and Poland in particular since the 1st of January 2021. But of course, moving on from that on to today, we're going to focus on what you need to do to prepare for the new GB import controls that will be coming in stages in GB. And on the next slide, they are outlined for us, please. Thank you. So the first stage of these, for those of you who've been using the exit summary waiver, that will end on the 1st of October, and health certificates and pre-notification will be required for products of animal origin, for animal byproducts, and for high-risk food and feed. I hope many of you are aware of that, but just in case, my colleagues from the Department of the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs will go through the detail of that with you. Then the second stage of the introductions for import controls will be from the 1st of January 2022. When entry summary declarations will be required for coming into GB, an important point there for hauliers and carriers that move goods into GB. And of course, at that point, then products of animal origin and so on will have to come in through border control posts. And there will be other requirements with border control posts coming online for regulated plant products and live animals from the 1st of March. So that's a very quick outline. It's a useful slide for you perhaps to keep, but it's a quick outline from us. My colleagues from across UK government departments are going to go through the detail now for you. And first we have Naheed Williamson from Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs. And Naheed is going to talk you through the customs requirements. The focus of today is moving food products, but we just want to remind you there are still customs requirements to be met. So Naheed, if you're ready, thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Margaret, and good afternoon, everyone. Hope you can hear me okay. So as Margaret has just said, my name is Naheed Williamson and I work in Her Majesty's Revenue Customs, HMRC, and I'll be speaking on the customs procedures. Okay, can I have the first slide, please? Thank you. Okay, so I'll start with the customs declarations. Throughout 2021, during 2021, importers of non-controlled EU goods will have the option of using delayed declarations in place of a full customs declaration. Now, this will be particularly useful and beneficial for those importers who may not have yet put in place procedures to make full customs declarations or been authorised to use the simplified customs processes. So if you're using the delayed declarations, you'll need to make a declaration in your commercial record at the time of import, which is known as the entry into declarants record, the EIDR in short, followed by the supplementary declaration within 175 days after the import. And those importers using the delayed declarations, they'll need to be authorised for simplified declaration, or they will need to appoint an agent who is authorised. Importers will also need to have access to a duty deferment account, DDA, before making the first supplementary declaration. Now, this of course will change from the 1st of January in 22, and importers or agents, their agent will need to be approved at the time of import to use the simplified procedure or make a full declaration. The same applies on the ENS, the entry summary declarations. From 1st of January 22, the ENS will be required on all imports. And on the exit summary declaration, the EXS, from 1st of October, the exit summary declarations will be required on all movements, which means that the current waiver that's in place on empty pallets, containers, this will all come to an end on the 30th of September. Okay, can I have the next slide, Kathleen? Thank you. Okay, has been so currently there is a 12-month waiver on the entry summary declarations for goods being imported from EU into GB. But in January 22, from 1st of January, as full entry summary declarations are required, this legal requirement will mean that the ENS is done, it's complete and accurate at the time it is submitted into the Safety and Security GB system, the SMS GB system. And an ENS must be submitted before goods arrive from GB. But we know that things change, that and information can change due to weather or traffic issues. So there is the opportunity to amend the ENS after the initial submission, and you can do that up to the point the goods arrive into the customs territory, into the territory. And just to add that, in terms of carriers, they have the legal responsibility to make sure that the safety and security declarations are submitted. But a third party can lodge a declaration, but if that happens, then it must be done with the carrier's knowledge and consent. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. Okay, just to give you an overview on the customs control models. So from 1st of January 22, there will be two main standard customs models to control goods being moved, imported into GB, and these will support the flow of goods and minimise the sort of the risk of congestion. Now, border locations receiving goods into GB from the EU will be able to operate the tried and tested temporary storage model, or they can or a new pre-lodgement, the new pre-lodgement model. The pre-lodgement model is for locations where space and infrastructure is limited and cannot accommodate the temporary storage requirements. Now, under the pre-lodgement model, it will be crucial to ensure that all goods have the appropriate declarations before they board. And there'll need to be communication with the person in control of the goods, that's the driver of a lorry for accompanied goods or carrier for the unaccompanied goods. This has to happen by the time they arrive, on whether the goods are clear to proceed or there needs to be a check. And ports operating a pre-lodgement will need to ensure that the goods are not arrived at that location without the pre-lodged declaration, and that they have taken all reasonable steps to ensure that the goods identified for any checks are then controlled when they actually arrive. Okay, can I have the next slide, please? The GVMS. Okay, so just as I touched on the fact that the new pre-lodgement control model will be in place at those locations and ports where there is a restriction of space and they don't have the infrastructure to hold goods on arrival. The new IT system, the Goods Vehicle Movement Service, the GVMS, this is going to operate to support this. And essentially, what GVMS does is the function will enable the declaration references to be linked together. So the driver, for example, will only need to present one single reference, that's a good movement reference, the GMR, at the frontier to prove that all the necessary declarations have been pre-lodged for the goods on the vehicle. The GVMS will also allow HMRC to send notification of any risks, either cleared or not cleared, into the system, into HMRC system, to the person in control of the goods. So by the time they physically arrive in the UK, they will know where they need to proceed to. And of course, the GVMS also automates the Office of Transit function, and it marks the entry of goods into the UK customs territory. Can I have the next slide, please, Kathleen? Okay, just a little process map for you, and on this slide, what you can see here is just the steps, the step-by-step process on GVMS imports, and it all starts with moving goods, what happens before they arrive at the EU place of exit, and then once they actually have arrived at the EU place of exit, followed by leaving the EU for the actual crossing. So I won't go into too much detail here on this particular slide. Can I take the next slide, please? Okay, on the VAT, just to stress, as the slide states, the postponed VAT accounting is available to VAT registered businesses for imports from anywhere in the world, and including the EU, up to 31st of December 2021. And there are certain circumstances where importers must use the PVA, but after that date, using the PVA will be optional in nearly all of the circumstances. So for delayed declarations or simplified procedures and entry in declarant's record, importers must use the PVA. The PVA is available but optional to traders who do not use declarations. Non-VAT registered traders will be able to pay VAT at the point of declaration, including the supplementary declaration, and the non-established taxable persons are also entitled to use the PVA, but they must hold a UK EORI and also instruct an agent to make the declaration on their behalf. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you, Kathleen. Just to cover this slide in brief, on Incoterms, given that these rules are set by the International Chamber of Commerce, it's an important part of the process, and taking key steps to agree the Incoterms ahead will ensure that there's a clear understanding on who is taking responsibility, and for you to be able to share this information within your own supply chain. But this is quite a crucial part of the process and to be aware of. I think that's all the slides, Kathleen, is that correct? Thank you. I'll pass you back to Margaret. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Naheed. We're starting to get some questions in now, as you will be able to see, colleagues. So if there are questions that you can pick up and answer in the Q&A, that would be lovely. No further delays from me, and I'm delighted now to hand over to both Jack Irwin and Jack Stacey from the Department of the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs to talk to us about exporting food. And I think, Jack Irwin, we're coming to you first. Thank you, Jack.
Thanks, Margaret. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. My name is Jack Irwin, and I work for the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs in the UK. Next slide, please. So today I'll be clarifying the phased import controls that the UK will be introducing on October 1st for food and drink being exported from the EU into Great Britain. I won't be able to cover everything in detail, but you'll receive this slide pack after the event today to read in your own time, and it's full of lots of useful links to further guidance. Please do use the Q&A function to indicate any area where you'd like to receive more clarification and to ask any questions of my colleagues who are joining for the Q&A later in today's event. I'll be joined by Jack Stacey and Lisa Ramsey on animal products and live animals, and Victoria Clark and Jason Pollock on plants and plant products. Next slide, please. Today I'll focus on controls that are coming into force from the 1st of October of this year and the 1st of January and 1st of March of next year. However, some controls did come into force in January earlier this year, and links to information about those can be found on this slide. Next slide, please. This slide gives you an overview of the timeline for all the import controls coming in for SPS products from October until March 2022. Products of animal origin refer to any product that's come from an animal and that is meant to be eaten by humans. So that includes things like dairy, meat, fish, honey, and eggs. These controls also apply to certain animal byproducts. So that's any animal product that's not for human consumption, and also high-risk food and feed not of animal origin. From October 2021, products of animal origin and animal byproducts will need to be accompanied by the relevant export health certificate. As the EU exporter, you're responsible for obtaining that health certificate, and your importer in Great Britain will need to pre-notify the arrival of the goods using the IPAF's IT system. High-risk food and feed not of animal origin will also need to be pre-notified on IPAFs. I'll cover both health certificates and IPAFs in more detail in the next few slides. If we look ahead to January of 2022, the requirements to pre-notify on IPAFs and produce the relevant export health certificate continue to apply. However, these products must now also arrive at an established point of entry with an appropriate border control post for that product. Next slide, please. I'll now give you some information on export health certification. From the 1st of October 2021, a health certificate will be required for products of animal origin for human consumption and also for animal byproducts not for human consumption. It is the EU exporter's responsibility to obtain the export health certificate, which will be issued to you by the competent authority in the country from which you're exporting from. A certifying officer authorised by the competent authority must complete the official certificate. They could be an official veterinarian or official inspector as defined by the relevant EU retained legislation. The EU exporter must send an electronic copy of the health certificate to their importer in Great Britain and ensure that a physical copy of the original health certificate travels with the consignment. Your importer in Great Britain must upload the electronic copy of the certificate to IPAFs as part of the pre-notification process. Any official sanitary and phytosanitary documents that are required to accompany the health certificate will be specified on that health certificate. Other documentation may be required depending on the commodity, such as a catch certificate for marine caught fish. You can find model health certificates on the gov.uk website, and you can use these to check the specific requirements for your commodity. I must stress that these are examples of the certificates, and the real certificates will be issued by the relevant competent authority in your country. There are more details about how these certificates are filled in on the link at the bottom of this slide. If you cannot find an appropriate health certificate, you should speak with your importer in Great Britain and check the gov.uk website for an import licence. If there is no import licence available, you'll need to complete an IV58 form and send it to the Animal Plant and Health Agency. Further links are available on this slide. Next slide, please. IPAFs, which stands for the Import of Products, Animals, Food and Feed System, is the IT system that enables your importer in Great Britain to notify the relevant authorities of the arrival of animals and animal products subject to sanitary and phytosanitary controls. From the 1st of October 2021, products of animal origin for human consumption, certain animal byproducts, and high-risk food and feed not of animal origin arriving from the EU will need to be pre-notified via IPAFs. The key thing for EU exporters to remember here is that your importer will need to upload the electronic copy of the health certificate that you obtained from the competent authority in Poland. This system and process will allow for remote documentary checks to take place from October of 2021 in order to preserve the flow of goods into Great Britain and prevent any delays at the border. Next slide, please. So laid out on this slide is the information that must be submitted as part of an IPAFs pre-notification. Between October and December of 2021, importers will be required to submit a simplified notification in IPAFs. From January of 2022, additional details will be required. You can find links to webinar demonstrations in our further guidance at the end. Next slide, please. Since January of earlier this year, live animals and germinal products have been required to pre-notify using IPAFs at least 1 working day before the expected time of arrival at the point of entry, and animals have to be accompanied by a health certificate. Your importer in Great Britain must supply the EU exporter or the official veterinarian with the unique notification number, that's the UNN, that is produced when the importer pre-notifies the UK's Animal Plant and Health Agency about the import via IPAFs. As the exporter, you must add the UNN to the commercial documentation or health certificate. Physical checks on live animals are carried out at destination, and these measures continue to apply. From the 1st of January 2022, there'll be new requirements for germinal products to enter via an established point of entry with an appropriate border control post. By March of 2022, live animals must also enter via an established point of entry with an appropriate border control post for documentary, identity and physical checks. High-risk live animals will continue to be checked at a rate of 100%. Next slide, please. Moving on to the phasing of controls for plants and plant products. Products in this category include plants for planting, vegetables, flowers, some seeds and most fruits unless they've been preserved by deep freezing. Currently, only high priority plants are subject to import controls. The next set of changes you need to be aware of are those that are coming into force on the 1st of January 2022, when high priority plants and plant products will start to undergo physical and identity checks at an appropriate border control post instead of at the place of destination. Also, by January of 2022, all regulated plants and plant products will need to follow the requirements for pre-notification and be accompanied by phytosanitary certification. By March of 2022, physical and identity checks on all regulated plants and plant products will be carried out at a border control post. Plant import notification will join IPAFs during autumn of this year. However, until your importer is advised to move on to the new system, you should continue to use the current service, which is Peach. Next slide, please. From January of 2022, plants and plant products will need to be accompanied by a phytosanitary health certificate. These will need to be obtained from the Plant Health Authority in the country where the supplier is based. An inspection for the certificate is to take place no more than 14 days before the consignment is dispatched from the country where your supplier is based. A copy of the phytosanitary certificate will need to be uploaded onto the import IT system Peach if you need to pre-notify your consignment until the notification process moves over to IPAFs later this year. Next slide, please. So a quick word on pre-notification times. For products of animal origin, certain animal byproducts and high-risk food and feed not of animal origin, importers must notify at least 4 hours in advance of arrival at the point of entry. Please be aware that this is a temporary arrangement and that from the 1st of January, you will need to contact the competent authority at the point of entry to determine whether a derogation from 24 hours can be applied for. For live animals, IPAF's pre-notification must be made at least 1 working day in advance of the goods arrival at the point of entry. Different pre-notification times will apply for plants and plant products, depending on the mode of transport. Please do check the slide for more details. Next slide, please. Now I'll take a look at composite products in a bit more detail. Composite food products are for human consumption only. They contain a mix of processed products of animal origin and plant products used as a main ingredient, not just added for flavouring or processing. To give you a few examples, that could include a ready meal lasagna, pork pies or mayonnaise if they contain more than 50% egg. Composite products must follow the stage requirements for products of animal origin as I have just laid out. However, there are a few exemptions. Some goods are exempt if they contain less than 50% processed animal product, no meat product, and they meet the requirements set out in legislation. If your goods contain any meat product or more than 50% animal product, it must be pre-notified using IPAFs and it must be accompanied by an export health certificate and follow the phased approach set out for products of animal origin. If you're not sure if this applies to your product, there is detailed guidance, including a composite product decision tree, available on the Animal Imports file sharing link, which you'll find at the end of this presentation. Next slide, please. Groupage is the term used by industry to describe the commercial grouping of multiple consignments within a single sealed trailer or container. There are 4 models that have been developed for importing groupage loads from the EU into Great Britain. These include, firstly, the consolidation hub method, whereby different consignments are brought together at a single approved premise. The certification takes place for all individual consignments by the certifying officer, and the grouped consignments are loaded and sealed before they leave for onward destination. Then there's the sequential or single model, which facilitates pickups from multiple sites. In this model, certification takes place at each site, a seal is applied to the overall load at each pickup point, removed and replaced at the next pickup. This method is reliant upon a certificate of non-manipulation. Finally, there's also the linear or multiple pallet model, which is designed to facilitate pickups from multiple sites, with certification at each point collection in the chain. This requires pallet level sealing. Sealed pallets are added to the means of transport, and the individual seal number on the pallet is recorded on the export health certificate. There's no requirement for a certificate of non-manipulation within this model, but it does require the presence of a certifying officer at each collection point. All models may be used in conjunction with each other, as long as general principles around sealing and certification remain. For example, traders may wish to blend the linear model with a consolidation hub method. The key with a mixed hybrid approach will be ensuring full traceability of all products entering GB. Please find a link to a video recording of a webinar which goes through these models in detail on this slide. Next slide, please. So there are a few changes to note in marketing standards and food labelling. Marketing standards are product specific, so please see the guidance linked on this slide for more commodity specific information. Most importantly, from the 1st of October 2022, so that's October of next year, pre-packaged food or casings sold in Great Britain must include a UK address for the food business operator. If the food business operator is not based in the UK, include the address of your importer who is based in the UK. From October of next year, there are also some changes to country of origin labelling. Again, these are commodity specific, so please see the link on this slide to see if that applies to your product. Next slide, please. The UK and the EU have recognised each other as equivalent for the purpose of trade in organic products until the 31st of December 2023 as part of the UK-EU Trade and Cooperation Agreement. From the 1st of January 2022, organic products imported into Great Britain from the EU will require a certificate of inspection. The organics import system in Great Britain is currently paper-based. Exporters will need to contact the port of arrival in Great Britain directly to inform them of the consignment so that the certificate of inspection can be endorsed. Please see the slide after the presentation for more info on the system for organic imports into Great Britain. Next slide, please. So I'll end my presentation with an overview of key actions that EU exporters need to take from October of 2021 and from the 1st of January of 2022. So from the 1st of October 2021, you must obtain the relevant export health certificate for products of animal origin and certain animal byproducts. You must make sure that your importer in Great Britain has a copy of the completed export health certificate as soon as it is available, and that the original certificate travels with the consignment. Turning to the 1st of January 2022, for regulated plants and plant products, please ensure you have the necessary certification and that this travels with the consignment. Products of animal origin, certain animal byproducts, or high-risk food and feed not of animal origin will need to arrive at a border control post with the appropriate checking facilities for your commodity. From the 1st of March 2022, all regulated plants and plant products will need to enter via an appropriate border control post, as will live animals. The final two slides following this one provide you with links to further guidance. I would in particular bring your attention to the Plant Health Portal and to the file sharing site for animal products. This service does require you to sign up with an email address, which may take a few days to process. However, it's full of the latest technical guidance. Unfortunately, we didn't have time to cover geographical indications today, so I'd urge you to look for the special guidance on that topic. Thank you for your attention, and I'll now hand over to Jack Stacey, who will talk you through a step-by-step case study for exporting chicken from Poland into Great Britain.
Thanks, Jack. Okay, great. Yeah. So as Jack says, my name's Jack Stacey, and I work for DEFRA's Biosecurity Borders and Trade programme. And I'll be quickly going through a case study of moving specifically chicken from Poland into Great Britain. Next slide, please. Okay, so just as a quick introduction to the characters that will be representing each end of the process, we've got Damien, who is a Polish chicken exporter. We've got Claire, who is a GB importer of Damien's chicken. And we've got Joe, who is the driver, and he'll be transporting the goods between EU and Great Britain. And just as a note, as you'll probably know, most businesses use a customs agent or freight forwarder to handle the paperwork. But in this case, it'll just be those listed on the screen that are dealing with the processes. Next slide, please. Okay, so the first step for Damien then is to apply for an EU EORI number, and that's so that he can interact with the EU systems. Next slide, please. Okay, so the next step then, and this is prior to shipping of the goods, Damien and Claire, who's obviously the GB importer, will need to agree the Incoterms that they trade on. And these Incoterms are just the roles and responsibilities set out before the exporting and importing can begin. In this case, Damien will be responsible for the export procedures, Claire responsible for the import procedures, and Joe's haulage company will be responsible for the safety and security declarations. And in this case, nothing is moving under transit. Next slide, please. Okay, so the next step then, Claire will need to apply for a GB EORI number herself if she hasn't already got one. And this is something that we recommend Damien should speak to Claire about before the export process begins to make sure that she has it. And in this case, or in all cases rather, Joe's haulage company will be responsible for obtaining the EU and the GB EORI numbers. And that's because obviously he will be interacting with both ends of the system. And this will be the case across all parties, whether a customs agent or a freight forwarder is being used. Next slide, please. Okay, so next, Damien will apply for an export health certificate, and that will entail the Polish certifying officer inspecting the goods and issuing and endorsing the certificate. And this will be needed every time that Damien sends his chicken to Great Britain. After that, Damien will need to make sure that he passes over the original signed document of the export health certificate, and that's usually by giving that to the driver who will be transporting the goods, in this case Joe. So in order to pre-notify the UK authorities that the chicken is going to be arriving in Great Britain soon, Claire will have created a notification on IPAFs, and as part of that notification, Damien will need to send an electronic scanned copy of the signed health certificate, whether that's a photocopy or a photograph, and he'll send that to her, and then she will upload that onto IPAFs as part of the notification. Next slide, please. Okay, so next, Damien will need to submit an export declaration, formerly called an export accompanying document. That will be to the Polish customs system. That in turn will produce a movement reference number. And on the export declaration, Damien will need to list the port of exit. And then Joe's haulier company will need to comply with the systems and procedures at the EU port of exit, but these may vary depending on the route chosen. Next slide, please. Okay, Joe, something to note along the way, because Damien has submitted a combined export and safety and security declaration, and he's got the EAD, a separate summary, exit summary declaration will not need to be submitted on the member state export control system. But if a combined declaration has not been submitted, then a separate export summary declaration would be required. Next slide, please. Okay, so at this point then, Damien has now submitted the EAD and he has prepared the EHC and he sent an electronic copy to Claire to upload onto IPAFS, at which point Joe will be able to collect the goods from Damien and begin taking them to Great Britain. And so as he sets off, Joe will need to make sure, and his haulage company will need to make sure that he has the movement reference number for the export declaration. You need to make sure that he's got the physical original paper copy, paper version of the export health certificate, as that needs to travel with the goods. He'll need to make sure that he's got the movement reference number for Claire's import declaration, or alternatively her EORI number if she's using simplified declarations, and that'll be up until the 1st of January. And also just to note, if Joe is not a UK or Polish national, he'll need to travel with his passport so that he'll be able to enter the country. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so at this point, the export health certificate will be subject to remote documentary checks. And once all of those have been passed, Joe will be able to enter Great Britain with the goods. Next slide, please. Okay, so that's a quick run through of the process with some context from the viewpoint of the importer as well as the transporter, but just as a quick run through of the requirements for the Polish exporter. To begin with, you'll need to apply for an an EORI number. He'll need to agree the Incoterms with the importer, then apply for an export health certificate and make sure that the goods are inspected by the relevant authorities, the competent authorities. And then he will need to send an electronic copy of the EHC to the importer to upload onto IPAFS and make sure that the original version travels with the goods, after which he will submit the export declaration to Polish customs and then carry on into Great Britain with the goods. Okay, so yeah, that was just a quick run through of the process, which I hope has been helpful. I know time's tight, so I'll quickly pass back to Margaret. But yes, thank you for listening, everybody.
Thank you very much, Jack. I think we're doing quite well on time, and I think you've touched on the fact that hauliers will need ID cards, but my colleague Natasha Draycott is now going to run through that in more detail on the next couple of slides. Thank you, Kathleen.
Thank you. So if we can go to the first slide, please. So I'll just quickly run through the information that's on the slide. So the main thing to flag on ID cards is that the rules will be changing from the 1st of October, which is in a few weeks' time. So from the 1st of October, it won't be possible to enter the UK using an ID card like it has been previously possible to do. Instead, most people, which includes hauliers, will need to use a passport. So drivers will need a passport to enter the UK from the 1st of October 2021. There are some exceptions, such as if you have settled status, and those exceptions are listed on the slide that's on your screen. However, just to reiterate that passports will be a requirement for most people entering the UK from the 1st of October. So if we go to the next slide, I'll leave you to read through sort of the detail of the Q&A on this slide, but just to flag and reiterate that drivers who arrive at the border without their passport might be refused entry into the UK. So businesses and haulage companies should encourage their drivers to make sure that they have the correct documentation. This change comes in on the 1st of October, so please ensure that you and your drivers are prepared. If anyone has any further questions on that information, then please pop it into the Q&A, and we'll work with Home Office colleagues to get back to you on that. Thank you, Margaret. I think we're handing over to our Polish colleague now.
Thank you very much. We've got, and that's the end of the presentations from UK officials, but I can see things are lively in the question and answer session, so please do keep your questions coming in. And if we could move on to the next slide, I'm delighted to welcome Monica and many others from across the departments in Poland who are joining us today. So Monica and team, if I can hand over to you, thank you very much.
Apologies for this. I think Polish colleagues, are you able to unmute yourselves?
I'm sorry, sometimes Teams plays up a little bit with us on muting people. We'll keep trying. Oh, hello. Come in, Poland. While we just get that sorted out, I might do a little sneak and ask some of our DEFRA colleagues a couple of questions that have come through in the chat. Is that all right, Natasha?
Yeah, Margaret, what I'll also do is I'll put the second Slido question up so people can be answering that while we try to...
Thank you. It sounds like we have Polish colleagues now. Thank you. Great. Over to you. Monica, Peter, are we there? Pavel?
You seem to be on mute again, I'm afraid.
Can you hear us?
Yes, we can hear you now. Thank you, Pavel. Are we ready to go? Wouldn't this be so much easier if we were all face to face in one large room? One day those days will come again. Pavel, how are we doing? Are we ready?
Okay, I changed my computer, so maybe it will be easier now to hear us.
Much better. It's a bit of an echo, but it's not bad. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So apologies for this. Dzień dobry Państwu. Nazywam się Monika Marks i króciutko tylko przypomnę Państwu wymagania dotyczące importu z Wielkiej Brytanii do Unii Europejskiej, w tym do Polski. Zanim przejdziemy do tematu, który chyba Państwa bardziej interesuje, czyli do tych zmian, które nastąpią po 1 października w zakresie eksportu. Next slide, please. Przede wszystkim chciałabym Państwa odesłać na naszą stronę internetową, ponieważ tutaj staramy się aktualizować wszystkie informacje dotyczące zasad importu i wymagań weterynaryjnych. Więc tutaj znajdziecie Państwo wszystkie informacje w zależności od grupy produktów bądź gatunku zwierząt, które Państwo chcecie sprowadzać z Wielkiej Brytanii do Unii Europejskiej. Oczywiście tam również znajdą Państwo wzory świadectw zdrowia, które obowiązują obecnie, a jeżeli coś jest niejasne, to oczywiście my odpowiadamy na wszystkie pytania, które są słychać. Next slide, please. Jeśli chodzi o zasady importu, to w zasadzie od 1 stycznia już Państwo zdążyli się pewnie zaznajomić z informacjami, które przekazywaliśmy systematycznie wszystkim zainteresowanym przywozem. Natomiast przypomnę tylko, w jakiej sytuacji w tej chwili jesteśmy. Otóż Wielka Brytania od 1 stycznia jest krajem trzecim, natomiast należy pamiętać, że Irlandia Północna pozostała w tej strefie, która zakłada cały czas wymianę handlową na zasadach handlu wewnątrzunijnego, a zatem te wszystkie informacje, które tutaj są podane, dotyczą jakby pozostałej części Wielkiej Brytanii, z której przywóz do Unii Europejskiej jest realizowany. Oczywiście w przypadku Wielkiej Brytanii, jak i każdego innego kraju trzeciego, w przypadku przywozu wynikają z tego jakieś konkretne ograniczenia, obowiązki. Tutaj jest cała lista tych informacji dla Państwa wygody zestawiona w taką bardzo krótką informację, natomiast to, co jakby z naszego punktu widzenia jest istotne, ponieważ większość tych towarów nie wprowadzana jest na teren Unii Europejskiej przez polskie punkty kontroli granicznej, to musimy pamiętać o tym, że to importer lub jego upoważniony przedstawiciel jest zobowiązany do tego, aby właściwie dokonać zgłoszenia tego towaru na granicy, ponieważ jak my obserwujemy przez te kilka miesięcy, to w zasadzie z tego wyłącznie wynikają pewne kłopoty dla naszych przedsiębiorców, że towar znajduje się w obszarze celnym Unii Europejskiej, natomiast nie został prawidłowo zgłoszony do kontroli i z tego tytułu mamy pewne sprawy, które potem musimy wyjaśniać. Nie zawsze da się to wyjaśnić w sposób satysfakcjonujący dla importera, także bardzo proszę pamiętać o tym obowiązku prawidłowego zgłaszania towaru na granicy zewnętrznej Unii Europejskiej, tam gdzie on będzie poddawany kontroli. Oczywiście służymy wszelkimi również informacjami dotyczącymi, w jaki sposób należy to zrobić, na jakich formularzach, ale myślę, że ci z Państwa, którzy prowadzą wymianę handlową z Wielką Brytanią, już zdążyli się do tych nowych warunków przyzwyczaić. Jeśli chodzi o wykorzystanie systemu Traces, to również jesteśmy tutaj w stanie Państwu doradzać, zresztą robimy to od jakiegoś czasu, w jaki sposób w tym systemie się logujemy, w jaki sposób uzyskujemy dostęp i w jaki sposób wypełniamy stosowne dokumenty. Next slide, please. Jeśli chodzi o taką trochę może informację, która nie zawsze do wszystkich Państwa trafia, a czasami jest również kłopot na granicy związany z tym, że przewoźnik jako osoba prywatna też przewozi pewnego rodzaju produkty pochodzenia zwierzęcego, które od 1 stycznia tego roku nie są dozwolone nawet w przypadku wykorzystania osobistego. Także proszę również na to zwrócić uwagę, aby takich produktów nie przewozić, ponieważ skutkuje to czasami nawet jakimiś sankcjami, które są wprowadzane przez te państwa członkowskie, gdzie ta osoba przekracza granicę zewnętrzną. Również tutaj dla Państwa wygody są wszystkie informacje podane w formie ulotek na stronie Głównego Inspektoratu Weterynarii i Komisji Europejskiej. Mogą się Państwo z nimi zapoznać. Next slide, please. I ostatnia informacja z mojej strony to jest taka informacja, która również dla Państwa może być istotna, ponieważ mieliśmy już przypadki, które wyjaśnialiśmy z podmiotami gospodarczymi, w jaki sposób można dokonać ponownego przywozu towaru, który został wyeksportowany do Wielkiej Brytanii, ale z jakichś powodów przez właściwe władze nie został on dopuszczony na teren Wielkiej Brytanii. Zresztą dotyczy to każdego innego kraju trzeciego. Otóż w takich przypadkach podstawowym warunkiem jest uzyskanie dokumentu, który poświadcza, że towar został zakwestionowany przez właściwy organ danego państwa. Czyli nie chodzi tutaj o zwroty z powodów, no nie wiem, nazwijmy to handlowych, natomiast chodzi tutaj przede wszystkim o zwroty w momencie, kiedy jakiś organ państwowy danego państwa trzeciego przesyłki nie zaakceptował i wystawił stosowny dokument, w którym poinformował o powodach tej odmowy. I wówczas taki towar może zostać wprowadzony ponownie na teren Unii Europejskiej po przeprowadzeniu weterynaryjnej kontroli granicznej. I tutaj taka moja uwaga, że dzisiaj ukazała się zmiana do prawa unijnego, tak bardzo ogólnie mówię, bo też musimy się z tym zapoznać, bo to jest bardzo świeża publikacja, która umożliwia wywóz produktów pochodzenia zwierzęcego do Wielkiej Brytanii z zamiarem ich składowania w zarejestrowanym bądź zatwierdzonym zakładzie, ale wyłącznie składowania i ponownego wwozu na rynek Unii Europejskiej po zaopatrzeniu w stosowne świadectwo zdrowia, którego wzór właśnie określa ten nowy akt prawny. Ale nie chciałabym tutaj wchodzić w szczegóły, bo jeszcze nie mieliśmy czasu zapoznać się z tą zmianą dogłębnie, natomiast na pewno informacja na ten temat pojawi się na naszej stronie internetowej i tam Państwo będziecie mogli znaleźć wszystkie szczegóły. Także z mojej strony to tyle. Bardzo dziękuję. Jeszcze raz przepraszam za trudności techniczne, ale pierwszy przeciera szlaki, także mam nadzieję, że moi koledzy już będą wygłaszali swoje prezentacje bez kłopotów. Dziękuję jeszcze raz.
Dzień dobry. Good afternoon. Do you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Thank you very
Paweł.
much. Ja chciałbym powiedzieć kilka słów odnośnie przesyłania zwierząt do Wielkiej Brytanii i could you next slide, if you please. Od 1 stycznia 2021 roku żywe zwierzęta, w tym koniowate i materiał biologiczny eksportowane do Zjednoczonego Królestwa, podlegają nowym kontrolom importowym. Przesyłka zwierząt musi być zaopatrzona w eksportowe świadectwo zdrowia zamiast świadectwa zdrowia zwierząt w handlu wewnątrzwspólnotowym. Oczywiście to nie dotyczy Irlandii Północnej, gdzie są specjalne, że tak powiem, tranzytowe świadectwa lub bezpośrednio, jeżeli są drogą lotniczą lub statkami bezpośrednio do Irlandii Północnej, to stosuje się normalne świadectwa do handlu wewnątrzwspólnotowego. I uprzednio zgłoszona przez importera za pomocą informatycznego systemu obsługi importu produktów zwierząt, żywności, pasz i paws co najmniej 1 dzień roboczy przed spodziewanym czasem przybycia do punktu i tak jak tutaj usłyszeliśmy od strony brytyjskiej, będzie to stosowane od 1 marca 2022 roku. Next slide, please. Od 1 stycznia 2022 roku materiał biologiczny eksportowany z UE do Zjednoczonego Królestwa i od 1 marca żywe zwierzęta eksportowane z UE do UK, w tym koniowate, będą podlegać dodatkowym wymogom. Przesyłka materiału biologicznego musi być zaopatrzona w eksportowe świadectwo zdrowia w celu przeprowadzenia kontroli dokumentów, uprzednio zgłoszona przez importera za pomocą IPAWS i wejść na terytorium Wielkiej Brytanii w przeznaczonym do tego miejscu kontroli granicznej, aby poddać się kontroli dokumentów, tożsamości, kontroli fizycznej, ale także musi być sprawdzone pod względem możliwości przeprowadzenia tej kontroli, czyli strona brytyjska musi odpowiedzieć, że jest taka możliwość. Next slide, please. I tutaj brytyjski importer ma obowiązek prenotyfikować przesyłkę w IPAWS, podać eksportowi z UE lub do urzędowego lekarza weterynarii niepowtarzalny numer notyfikacji i wywieźć przesyłkę przez przeznaczony do tego punkt kontroli. I tutaj odpowiednio od 1 stycznia 2022 roku będzie się to stosowało dla materiału biologicznego i od 1 marca 2022 roku dla zwierząt. Next slide, please. I polski eksporter ma obowiązek powiadomić urzędowego lekarza weterynarii w celu wypisania go do świadectwa zdrowia i przekazać kopię świadectwa zdrowia brytyjskiemu importerowi. Tak jak tutaj usłyszeliśmy od strony brytyjskiej, może to być w formie skanu i wywieźć przesyłkę przez wyznaczony punkt wyjścia UE przeznaczony do kontroli dobrostanu zwierząt. I tu jest od 2020 roku, od 1 stycznia 2002 roku. Next slide, please. I tutaj są wymagane weterynaryjne wymagania opublikowane na stronach służb weterynaryjnych Wielkiej Brytanii, a także świadectwa zdrowia w wersji angielskiej, czyli wzory tych świadectw również na stronach Wielkiej Brytanii. Next slide, please. Bardzo dziękuję. Thank you very much for attention and I will wait for questions. Maybe later, yes.
Witam. Teraz w kolejnej części prezentacji omówimy też w skrócie, niektóre informacje były już wcześniej też i wskazywane linki do odpowiednich stron. Będzie o wywozie żywności pochodzenia zwierzęcego z Polski na rynek Wielkiej Brytanii. Na tym slajdzie wskazano Państwu informacje, gdzie można znaleźć na stronie Głównego Inspektoratu Weterynarii, jeśli chodzi o eksport żywności pochodzenia zwierzęcego na rynek Wielkiej Brytanii, jak również wskazano link do właściwej strony internetowej władz brytyjskich, tak, gdzie te informacje też są zamieszczone, jeśli chodzi o żywność pochodzenia zwierzęcego. Next slide. Jeśli chodzi o generalnie zasady wywozu żywności pochodzenia zwierzęcego z Polski na rynek Wielkiej Brytanii, tutaj te produkty pochodzenia zwierzęcego wywożone do Wielkiej Brytanii muszą pochodzić z zakładów posiadających uprawnienia do ich wprowadzania na rynek Unii Europejskiej. Listy zakładów zatwierdzonych zgodnie z rozporządzeniem unijnym 853 są publikowane na stronie Komisji Europejskiej. Jednakże strona brytyjska, też należy podkreślić, nie wymaga uwzględniania na wyżej wymienionych tych listach podmiotów rejestrowanych zgodnie z rozporządzeniem 852, czyli na przykład zakłady konfekcjonowania miodu. Też dość istotna informacja, takie podmioty jak na przykład hurtownie spożywcze nieobjęte nadzorem organów inspekcji weterynaryjnej, zamierzające prowadzić wysyłki żywności pochodzenia zwierzęcego na rynek Wielkiej Brytanii, mogą pozostawać pod nadzorem organów Państwowej Inspekcji Sanitarnej i równocześnie żądać wydania eksportowego świadectwa zdrowia przez organ inspekcji weterynaryjnej, jeśli to leży w ich interesie prawnym. I tutaj tak na marginesie, na poziomie Głównego Inspektoratu w tej chwili też uszczegółowiamy zasady współpracy między nami a Państwową Inspekcją Sanitarną w zakresie certyfikacji przesyłek żywności pochodzenia zwierzęcego prowadzonej na rzecz podmiotów znajdujących się poza nadzorem organów inspekcji weterynaryjnej, czyli pod wyłącznym nadzorem organów inspekcji sanitarnej. Next slide, please. To już było też omawiane, to co jest zamieszczone na tym slajdzie, na poprzednich slajdach, tutaj prezentowanych na tym spotkaniu, ale przypomnę, od 1 stycznia przy wwozie do Wielkiej Brytanii strona brytyjska wymaga eksportowych świadectw zdrowia tylko w odniesieniu do produktów pochodzenia zwierzęcego objętych środkami bezpieczeństwa z powodu występowania chorób zwierząt na terytorium państwa eksportera. I tutaj jeśli chodzi, i te świadectwa, no to w przypadku Polski, że w związku z występowaniem afrykańskiego pomoru świń na terytorium Polski zgodnie z wyjaśnieniami władz brytyjskich wwóz do Wielkiej Brytanii jest dozwolony z tych obszarów objętych ograniczeniami w związku z ASF, które obecnie kwalifikują się do handlu wewnątrzunijnego. W przypadku wysoce zjadliwej grypy ptaków w Polsce władze Wielkiej Brytanii potwierdziły, że zakazany jest eksport z obszaru zagrożonego i zapowietrzonego, chyba że produkty zostały poddane odpowiedniej obróbce termicznej, czyli tutaj będzie wchodziła w grę obróbka 70 stopni Celsjusza. No i lista wyłączonych obszarów jest zamieszczona na stronie władz brytyjskich. Tutaj jest też podany link. Te wszystkie linki w tej prezentacji można otworzyć i one przekierowują od razu do strony. Ponadto w przypadku tych produktów pochodzenia zwierzęcego objętych środkami bezpieczeństwa brytyjski importer jest zobowiązany do złożenia odpowiednim służbom brytyjskim prenotyfikacji za pomocą informatycznego systemu IPAWS oraz przekazania polskiemu eksporterowi wygenerowanego przez ten system numeru. I numer ten powinien być wskazany w eksportowym świadectwie zdrowia towarzyszącym przesyłce lub w dokumentacji handlowej. Next slide, please. Natomiast tutaj data, która się zbliża w tej chwili, czyli od 1 października przy wwozie do Wielkiej Brytanii strona brytyjska będzie wymagać eksportowych świadectw zdrowia w odniesieniu do pozostałych produktów pochodzenia zwierzęcego. Zgodnie z wyjaśnieniami władz brytyjskich eksportowe świadectwa zdrowia będą również dotyczyły niektórej żywności złożonej. Zasady eksportu tutaj tego rodzaju żywności złożonej znajdują się też tutaj pod wskazanym linkiem. Ponadto przesyłki też będą musiały być prenotyfikowane przez brytyjskiego importera w systemie IPAWS, ale numer generowany z tego systemu nie będzie już musiał być umieszczany w certyfikacie. Brytyjski importer będzie musiał uzyskać od polskiego eksportera wersję elektroniczną eksportowego świadectwa zdrowia w celu zamieszczenia go w systemie IPAWS. Forma papierowa z kolei tego świadectwa towarzyszy przesyłce żywności pochodzenia zwierzęcego kierowanej na rynek Wielkiej Brytanii. Jeśli chodzi o świadectwa, które weszły tam od 1 stycznia, przeznaczone dla produktów pochodzenia zwierzęcego objętych środkami bezpieczeństwa z powodu występowania chorób zwierząt na terytorium państwa eksportera, czy tutaj u nas w Polsce ASF i zjadliwa grypa, wysoce zjadliwa grypa ptaków, będą one w dalszym ciągu obowiązywać na tych samych zasadach, jakie obowiązują od nas od 1 stycznia. Next slide. Wymagania przewozowe Wielkiej Brytanii w odniesieniu do żywności pochodzenia zwierzęcego są zawarte, tutaj podkreślę, dla konkretnej żywności poszczególnych rodzajów asortymentów są zawarte w treści wzorów świadectw zdrowia. Te wzory świadectw zdrowia są publikowane na stronie internetowej rządu brytyjskiego. Również tutaj jest wskazany link, gdzie można te świadectwa znaleźć dla poszczególnych rodzajów asortymentów. Tutaj w celu umożliwienia wystawiania świadectw eksportowych w językach narodowych przez urzędników certyfikujących przesyłki kierowane na rynek Wielkiej Brytanii, Komisja Europejska podjęła się przetłumaczenia i udostępnienia ich w odpowiednim module systemu TRACES. Ale tutaj podkreślę, oczywiście to świadectwo w wersji papierowej po wystawieniu w Polsce przez właściwy organ, ono musi w wersji papierowej towarzyszyć fizycznie przesyłce do Wielkiej Brytanii. Next slide. Też dość istotna informacja, że od dnia 1 października tego roku zacznie obowiązywać zakaz eksportu z obszaru Unii Europejskiej, czyli w tym Polski, do Wielkiej Brytanii pewnego rodzaju produktów pochodzenia zwierzęcego. Te produkty tutaj zostały wskazane, czyli chłodzone mięso mielone, wołowe, wieprzowe, jagnięce, baranie, kozie, chłodzone lub mrożone mięso mielone drobiowo, oddzielone mechanicznie mięso pozyskane z drobiu ptaków bezgrzebieniowych lub ptaków łownych, nieklasyfikowane jaja, surowe mleko od krów pochodzących ze stad zarażonych gruźlicą, chłodzone surowe wyroby mięsne. Informacje te też są w tym zakresie tych zakazów zamieszczone na stronie internetowej władz brytyjskich po wskazanym na tymże slajdzie linku. Natomiast też należy zauważyć, że ten zakaz wynika z takich samych ograniczeń, jakie są wprowadzone przez Unię Europejską w stosunku do tych samych asortymentów przywożonych z państw nienależących do Unii Europejskiej. I to jeśli chodzi o żywność pochodzenia zwierzęcego. Next slide, please. Byłoby najważniejsze informacje, jeśli chodzi z kolei gdyby były jakieś wątpliwości, pojawiały się w trakcie planowania wysyłek przez podmioty żywności pochodzenia zwierzęcego, to można je kierować albo bezpośrednio do właściwych dla miejsca wysyłki, podkreślę, powiatowych lekarzy weterynarii. Dane powiatowych lekarzy weterynarii są tutaj dostępne na stronie Głównego Inspektoratu Weterynarii. Zamieszczone są, tutaj jest też zamieszczony w prezentacji link, jak również do nas, czyli do Głównego Inspektoratu Weterynarii, na adres również tutaj mailowy, który jest podany vet@vet.gov.pl. Next slide, please. I to już jest, tak, oddaję głos koledze.
Thank you very much. Jeżeli chodzi o produkty uboczne pochodzenia zwierzęcego, należy pamiętać, że produkty te dzielą się na dwie kategorie: produkty wysokiego ryzyka i produkty niskiego ryzyka. W przypadku produktów wysokiego ryzyka generalnie jest zakaz wywozu do krajów trzecich, również do Wielkiej Brytanii, właśnie produktów wysokiego ryzyka, czyli kategorii pierwszej i drugiej. Jest to zakaz ogólnounijny, natomiast jak najbardziej można wywozić do krajów trzecich produkty niskiego ryzyka, czyli produkty kategorii pierwszej, surowe i przetworzone. Obecnie wymiana handlowa między Unią Europejską a Wielką Brytanią, jeżeli chodzi o produkty kategorii trzeciej, surowe i produkty pochodne, odbywa się na zasadzie dołączania do przesyłek tych produktów dokumentu handlowego. Natomiast zmiana nastąpi od 1 października 2021 roku. Od właśnie tego okresu przesyłki wywożone z Unii Europejskiej do Wielkiej Brytanii będą musiały być zaopatrzone w świadectwo zdrowia zgodne ze wzorem określonym przez stronę brytyjską. Wzory tych świadectw zdrowia są dostępne na stronach internetowych Ministerstwa Brytyjskiego, również Głównego Inspektoratu Weterynarii, pod linkami generalnie tymi samymi, które tutaj w tej prezentacji wielokrotnie się przewijały. Aktualnie one są w języku angielskim, natomiast mam nadzieję, że do 1 października te świadectwa zdrowia będą również dostępne w języku polskim. Także ta zmiana będzie dotyczyła od 1 października 2021 roku, natomiast od 1 stycznia, drodzy Państwo, 2022 dodatkowo produkty uboczne pochodzenia zwierzęcego i produkty pochodne będą musiały być przewożone przez określone punkty kontroli granicznej i te punkty kontroli granicznej będą ściśle określone. One są wymienione w jednym z rozporządzeń i decyzji, które również są dostępne na stronie Głównego Inspektoratu Weterynarii. Next slide, please. Paweł, to chyba już...
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Paweł Mackiewicz. I'm representing Feed, Rendering and Pharmacy Office, and I'm responsible for feed area. And let me continue in my native language. Jeżeli chodzi o eksport pasz do Wielkiej Brytanii, z chwilą, kiedy Wielka Brytania stała się krajem trzecim, dla eksportu z Polski, z Unii Europejskiej niektórych dodatków paszowych, niektórych pasz, wymagane jest ustanowienie przedstawicielstwa w Wielkiej Brytanii. Dokonaliśmy przeglądu stron internetowych brytyjskiego urzędu odpowiedzialnego za nadzór nad paszami. Tutaj macie Państwo zaprezentowany link, gdzie te informacje się znajdują i możemy tam odnaleźć informację, że ze wskazaniem import jakiego rodzaju pasz i dodatków wymaga ustanowienia przedstawicielstwa w Wielkiej Brytanii. Na stronie internetowej wskazana jest informacja, że są to producenci niektórych dodatków paszowych, niektórych produktów białkowych oraz producenci premiksów zawierające te dodatki. Tutaj potrzebujemy jeszcze wyjaśnić, doprecyzować ze stroną brytyjską, czy te niektóre dodatki paszowe i niektóre produkty białkowe to są te same, które wchodzą w zakres dyrektywy 95/69 i oczekujemy takiej informacji od strony brytyjskiej. Jeżeli chodzi o import z Wielkiej Brytanii do Polski, obowiązują bliźniacze zasady, czyli przedsiębiorstwo z Wielkiej Brytanii powinno mieć ustanowione przedstawicielstwo w Polsce, w Rzeczpospolitej Polskiej, aczkolwiek nasze przepisy dopuszczają również sytuację, w której takie przedstawicielstwo jest ustanowione w jakimkolwiek innym kraju Unii Europejskiej. Next slide, please. Na stronie brytyjskiego urzędu odnaleźliśmy szereg bardzo istotnych informacji i formularzy, które będą czy powinny być wykorzystywane przez Państwa podczas ubiegania się o uzyskanie wpisu na listę przedstawicielstw zakładów państw trzecich w Wielkiej Brytanii. Są tutaj umieszczone gotowe formularze wraz ze wzorem, jak one powinny wyglądać. I dodatkowo odnaleźliśmy taki wykaz podmiotów, które już w chwili obecnej są zarejestrowane jako przedstawicielstwa. Podczas sporządzania tego slajdu udało nam się zidentyfikować 2 polskie zakłady, natomiast wczoraj, jak przeglądałem stronę internetową, okazuje się, że już 3 polskie zakłady dopełniły tego obowiązku i mogą być oficjalnie eksporterami z Polski dodatków paszowych do Wielkiej Brytanii. I to wszystko, co miałem w tej chwili do powiedzenia, jeżeli chodzi o eksport pasz niepochodzenia zwierzęcego do Wielkiej Brytanii.
The next slide, please. Tutaj przygotowaliśmy dla Państwa taką zbiorczą tabelę dotyczącą poszczególnego rodzaju asortymentu, jak również jakie dokumenty są potrzebne przy spełnieniu brytyjskich wymagań importowych oraz terminy, z jaką datą wprowadzane są poszczególne wymagania, dokumenty, kontrole. Także tutaj mają Państwo zebrane informacje w formie pomocniczej tabeli. Next slide, please. I to by było tyle z naszej strony, jeżeli chodzi o informacje z Głównego Inspektoratu Weterynarii. Dziękujemy serdecznie za uwagę. Thank you very much for your attention and now we are waiting for your questions if you have any. Jeśli Państwo mają jakieś pytania, to tutaj jest czas, żeby je zadać. Dziękuję. Na czacie.
Thank you all very much. I can hear a bit of an echo, but we have some questions. We have plenty of questions. Thank you to the audience as well for keeping it lively in the chat. And I know a number of my colleagues in UK departments have been answering those questions in the Q&A, but just for the benefit of all in the audience and to allow our Polish presenters to catch their breath after all those presentations and think about it, I might cover off some of the questions that you've already given answers to. And maybe if I could come to the customs questions first, Naheed and team, is that all right? If we just finish those off, the majority of the questions are about moving food and drink and other products, but if we could come to the questions about customs declarations. There was a little bit of toing and froing and questioning about the requirement for EXS, that is safety and security declarations for goods being exported from GB into the EU on empty trucks. Could you confirm for the audience whether those export safety and security declarations are required for empty trucks coming back from the UK into the EU, please?
Yeah, hi Margaret. I tried to put a helpful explanation in there into the question being raised to say that the approach to being taken is really broadly in line with the safety and security approach that the WCO, the World Customs Organization framework, sets out on pre-arrival or departure collection and the risking information for consignments entering or exiting a territory. So I've put down that obviously we know the safety and security information is provided within the full export declaration. So an EXS is not a common requirement for the empties, and that there is a standalone EXS declaration will be required if those empty pallets containers are moved out, but they're not under a contract, which is in line with the UCC article. And I'm hoping that sort of explains broadly the rationale for having for the waiver and having the EXS requirement for trucks, units, etc.
Thank you very much. And if forgive me, Naheed, if you've already done this, but if there is a link to some guidance in there for the audience, that would be lovely. If you'd like to post that in the Q&A, it'd be very helpful. The other question that we had that I've seen on customs, and apologies to all of you if I've missed any others, but there was a question about whether transit documentation would be required to come in through Dover. This is for after January 22 or when the full customs controls come in. So would a transit document be required, or would somebody have to use the pre-lodgement model? I mean, perhaps I've misunderstood the question, but I think it'll be a choice for the supply chain as to whether they want to move the goods by transit or they want to just export from the EU and import to GB. Do correct me if I'm wrong or if I've missed anything on that particular question.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Yeah, we were looking at that question, and unfortunately, the person we would normally have on the call isn't with us at the moment. Now, I have another colleague, and I'm not sure if we are ready to send that answer in just yet, because I was keeping a watching brief on that one. So my apologies if we haven't been able to yet pop that answer in the chat. Can we come back on that one, Margaret? I'm really sorry about that.
That's okay, thank you. And with a big thank you to my colleagues in the British Embassy, they have translated a question that has come in on Q&A for us in Polish. And the question is about whether the return of goods for commercial reasons. So if you've had goods arrive in GB and you wanted to return them for commercial reasons, would they also be subject to the procedures, the export and import procedures from a customs point of view, would they be? Or is that something you need to come back on?
I would definitely want to come back on that one,
okay.
Margaret. I
Thank
think
you.
The right answer there. Thank you.
Lovely. Okay. Well, for those questions that we haven't answered, as I said, we will take them away and we will provide a question and answer document. Now, if my colleagues who deal with the movement of food and drink are ready in the UK and Poland, I'm going to start on the sort of summarising the questions we've had there. I see Anastasia has joined us, and that means she will be leading the DEFRA team on their answers. But the first question that we've had, as we're beginning to see over the last couple of weeks, is about certificates. There's a lot of questions about the certificates that are required. And today, a number of those questions focus on when will the UK and Poland have an agreed set of certificates? Is there work going on to make sure that we're all using the right certificates, or is that something that I've misunderstood?
Thank you very much, Margaret. So before I hand over to my colleague Jack Stacey, who might be able to give you a bit more detail on health certificates, I think sort of the key thing to say here is that these will be issued to you by the competent authority in Poland. So although you can access some examples of these health certificates on gov.uk, which is the UK government website, these are just examples, and these examples are available for the full range of commodities. Now, if you cannot find the right certificate for your commodity, you will need to apply for an import license. And again, we've linked that for you on the slide deck, which I know, Margaret, your team will be sending out after today's event. Mm-hmm. Now, if there's no export health certificate available, you will need to complete an IV58 form and email that to our Animal and Plant Health Agency. Now, again, that I've left more details for that for you on the slide deck. I will just hand over to, first of all, Jack Stacey to see if he's got anything to add from a products of animal origin perspective, but then I might also just hand you over to Vicky Clark, who joins us from our plant team, just in case there's anything further she'd like to say on phytosanitary certification. Jack, over to you first.
Thanks, Anastasia. Yeah, I think that there've been quite a few sort of versions of this question with sort of varying levels of complexity. I think it might be best if we come back with one sort of all-encompassing response in writing later on. But just to clarify one aspect of it, essentially the certificate will be down to the certifying officer in the relevant EU country, obviously in this case Poland. And to make sure that that's in the correct language and that it's also sort of legible by the GB port health authorities. So I think it does depend on both ends of the process. But yeah, like I say, because there's been so many iterations of this same question, I think it might be best if we respond in writing and make sure that we hit every point that's being asked.
Thank you, Jack. I just wanted to, because one of the other questions of that was that, is it acceptable to have a certificate issued coming from Poland and in Polish for GB authorities? I think what you're saying is it should be in English.
In English, yeah, that's correct.
In English. Okay,
yep.
Thank you. So that's one we've managed to answer, but I take your point. As you say, there's a lot of questions around the subject certificates, and unless Victoria wanted to add anything else?
No, I don't think there's anything further from me. I mean, the only point I was going to make that from a plant health or a phytosanitary perspective, we only have one phytosanitary certificate because it's an internationally recognised certificate. So I think it's fairly straightforward from our point of view, but there's nothing further for me to add, and happy to contribute to any written response.
Thank you. I'm going to...
Margaret, sorry, it's Lisa Ramsey here. I can add just a little bit more detail around it. All existing and most of the new EHCs are available, and traders can decide which ones they wish to use until the 15th of January. A small number of new EHCs have been removed from EHC Online for now, and this is because the EU will be amending some EHCs, and some are subject to ongoing discussions with the EU regarding GB's disease freedom status. But traders should continue to use the existing EHCs for these products until the new certificates are made available again. And they'll be available well in advance of the 15th of January 2022. So that's the latest on that.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. I was going to come to our Polish colleagues now and officials, and we were asked a number of questions about the certificates from the Polish point of view about, and I do apologise, you possibly covered this in your slides, but I haven't had a translated version of them yet. But so if we were applying and we're in Poland and we're applying for a certificate, how much notice do we have to give the authorities? And are you comfortable and confident that you'll be able to issue those certificates as and when they're needed for GB import controls?
Yeah, I think I can field that one. So yeah, the notification on IPAFs will need to be made at least 24 hours before the consignment is due to arrive in Great Britain, unless there is some sort of derogation for obviously various circumstances. But yeah, that's the general rule.
Thank you, Jack. My question was for the Polish authorities as well, as to how much notification should a Polish exporter give authorities in Poland before they need to have a certificate produced. Are we having trouble with unmuting again? And Monica and team? No? I'll come back to that. Okay. Related questions on certificates, and this will be for our colleagues in DEFRA. Could, oh, sorry.
Właśnie. Ja w to klikam, to nie działa.
I'll come back. So, DEFRA colleagues. Oh, Pavel, hello.
Yeah, can you hear us?
I can hear you now, sorry.
Yes, so coming back to the questions about the notification time, so it's 24 hours.
24 hours, lovely, thank you very much. 24 hours notice. Okay, thank you. So getting ready to make those bookings now. I assume you could apply for, you know, before 24 hours, couldn't you? You could apply 48 hours or weeks before. UK colleagues, there was a question about, and maybe Polish colleagues would like to join as well, there's a question about the procedure for export health certificates if you've got goods loaded at different sites across Europe on the way through to a port or border. So does a certificate need to be filled in for each of the different loads added to that groupage load, or would you wait till you get to the port, do you think, and do the certificate there?
Thanks, Margaret. So I believe your question here is relating to various groupage models. I think what I would possibly advise Polish businesses is to take a look at the links on the slide on groupage that point to much more detailed webinars that run through the various models and the different ways that you could approach this in a lot more detail than we possibly could today. I will just hand over to my colleague Lisa Ramsey, as I know she can point you in the direction of lots more useful guidance that you can look at on groupage, because, like I say, it's quite a technical policy area, and I think the existing resources we have should be able to point you on your way.
Thanks, Anastasia. Yes, I think that's absolutely right. It is a complex topic, and the first port of call would be the imports Dropbox, a presentation that has very useful videos and presentations, and there will be a detailed Q&A being uploaded to that site. It's got a descriptions of the various groupage models that are being developed and proposed. So I would just reiterate that I would encourage the traders to register with the site, and they'll be able to sign up to email updates as well.
Thank you both. There was a question about whether the export health certificate needs to travel from various destinations in the EU, but Anastasia and Pavel and team, please correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding is that the requirement to have the export health certificate with the goods is a requirement when those goods leave the EU territory and come into GB. Of course, ideally you get the certificate issued in the country of origin where the goods are coming from, but it is the GB's requirement when the goods are moving into GB that the export health certificate is with the goods then, is that correct?
Hi,
yeah,
Margaret.
the short answer, yes, is yeah, that's correct.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jack.
Thanks, lovely.
Also, just to add, Margaret, you do also need to make sure that you have an electronic copy to send to your importer in Great Britain for when they make that IPAFFS pre-notification, because as part of that, they need to upload the health certificate onto the IPAFFS in order to make that work.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to come on to IPAFFS in a moment for you as well. The other question that I had on certificates picked up was about wooden pallets. So if the goods are coming in on wooden pallets, is there a certificate, a phytosanitary certificate required for those pallets separately in addition to the goods?
Margaret, so there's no requirement for a phytosanitary certificate here, but what you do need to be aware of with wood packaging material, so that includes things like pallets and crates, is that they need to comply with the ISPM 15 international standards for treatment and compliant marking. So the wood packaging material holding a consignment may also be subject to inspections upon entry to the EU to verify compliance with the ISPM 15 requirements as well. But I can see that one of my colleagues has put a link to some more detail on that in the chat.
Perfect, thank you. If you're moving food or drink and goods that require certificates in a container or in an unaccompanied load, how does the certificate travel with those goods? Is it stuck to the side of the container, the unaccompanied load? How does it travel?
I might hand you over to one of my animal imports colleagues to see if they can add a bit more detail for that on you. Add a bit more detail to that for you.
Thank you.
Hi there. I think Lisa, did you answer one perhaps on seals and things within the Q&A there?
Yes, I did. Thanks, Jack.
Okay.
Yes, there's no defined way of how it should travel with the truck driver, but the health certificate should be available for officials at the border control post. I think the only recommendation that we have is that it's not located behind the seal, because that may need to be broken at some point. So it really is a commercial decision how it travels, but it does have to be available for officials at the border control post.
Okay, so if it was travelling unaccompanied, for instance, with the driver dropping it in the EU and another driver picking it up when it arrives in the UK, it should be outside the seal somewhere on the container, I suppose.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Okay, thank you. Lovely. Now, I think just finalising on the health certificates, there is a question that says, is it one health certificate per importer or is it for consignment of goods? I think I know the answer to this, but I won't spoil it.
It is for each consignment.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. And if if consignments were coming in and going to different destinations in GB, so for instance, I was bringing in one consignment, but I was splitting it in GB and it was going to different cities in GB, would I need separate health certificates for those, for each of the consignments going to different cities, or would I need, would one do just to get me through the border?
My understanding is that each consignment will need a separate health certificate. The actual destination is not significant as long as each of the consignments has a health certificate attached and can make its way through the border control post.
Thank you. There was a bit of toing and froing on a question about non-manipulation, but there was a question about whether a template is available for a certificate of non-manipulation. Apologies if you've already replied to that and provided a link if one is available, but just thought I'd flag it.
I think I've put a note in the Q&A that is being finalised, so it will be made available. And again, I would recommend signing up to the trader emails, and that will be the first sort of announcement when it is available.
Thank you. Thank you. I think I was going to come on to IPAFs now. The first question I saw on IPAFs was about uploading a document on IPAFs. Should it be done before the goods arrive in GB?
Thanks, Margaret. I think the answer to that would be yes, but I will hand you over to my colleague Angela Cooper, who is our lead on IPAFs.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, it should be uploaded 24 hours before, just the same timing as your notification needs completing.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Does the IPAFs pre-notification number that you will get need to enter onto that export health certificate?
So only for live animals coming from the EU. For products of animal origin and high-risk food not of animal origin, there's no need to add the IPAFs notification number or UNN number onto the health certificate.
Okay, lovely, thank you. There was a question about EU exporters needing to register with IPAFs, and forgive me if you've covered this to death, but just wanted to clarify that to register and use IPAFs, would somebody need to be established in GB or in the UK?
That's correct, yes.
Yes.
Go on.
Sorry, and if they're not, I assume they could use an agent to do that for them.
That's
a
correct.
UK-based agent. Okay, thank you. Lovely. Thank you. Oh, I have one more question. I see another one on certs. There was apparently there's an abattoir box on certificates. Can that be left empty, or should it include detail?
I'm afraid I don't know the answer to that, Margaret. What I can tell you is that every field does need to be filled out on the health certificate for that product. I don't know whether one of my other colleagues has anything further to add to that.
Anastasia, yeah, I'm not certain either. I know as much as you that the whole thing needs to be filled out, but perhaps that's something we could check and respond to you later.
Okay, thank you. We will do. There was a mention of a extension on chill meat requirements till the new year. I wonder if somebody could talk us through that, please.
I don't know whether Jack, Lisa or Angela Derbyshire, you have a bit more information on that you can share today.
Hi Margaret. Yeah, I think we probably need just a little bit more context around the question. If you've got it, or perhaps we could come back to it later if need be.
It was a question. Yes, it was a question that came up, and it's something that's ringing a bell in the back of my mind that there's an extension to some requirements recently. But let's come back to that, and we'll answer it more fully, properly, rather than my trying to guess what the question was about. That's fine.
Great.
Okay, thank you. And my colleagues in Poland, we have a number of questions here. I might pass over the question as to why is it so complicated to move fish, unless somebody would like to take that up and explain to us why it's so complicated to move fish. But there is a question, a more straightforward question about should a notification be made in Traces NT? Should it be done by the exporter in the EU only? It's not a requirement, I understand, for the UK importer. Is that correct? I'll give you a little bit of time to come off mute. Pavel and team, will you be able to answer a question for me on Traces NT? Okay, we'll come back to that. Okay, thank you. I have another question here for my colleagues in the UK. It was the first question in. In fact, it was in before the event started. So apologies if you have answered it already, but is the requirements for avian flu clearly set out somewhere? If I've understood the question correctly, when certifying that goods are free from the avian flu, vets would consider the 30-kilometre radius around the site of the goods moving. And what is the position on that, and is it clearly written down somewhere?
Thanks, Margaret. I think I will come back to this one in writing with just a bit more detail, because I think we will need some more technical policy experts to have a look at that one for you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. There was another question that I've just picked up. I think we're getting close to the end of the questions, but that I've seen. But there's a question about whether vet approval of plant products is required for GB. I assume there's a handy list of the sorts of certificates that are needed for the different products. I wonder if somebody could post that.
Sorry, Margaret, is that in relation to plant products, did you say?
Yes, plant products. Yes. Yeah.
Great. Vicky, I wonder if you could just run through perhaps maybe some of the key phases for the different types of plants and plant products, and give an indication of where people can go to find out a bit more guidance on gov.uk.
Yeah, no worries. Currently we are sort of checking goods at place of destination. So this come in from January this year, so January 2021. We're checking high priority plants at places of destination. So there's already some import controls in place at the moment, and there is a high priority goods list on our gov.uk pages, which I can share in the link in the chat. Sorry, and then from January 2022, there will be an increased requirement for pre-notification and phytosanitary certificates for all regulated goods from January 2022. High priority goods will move to BCPs, so they'll have their physical checks done at BCPs, and then from March, all regulated goods will be subject to checks, both physical ID and doc checks from March. So everything's in place from March 2022. I do have a handy sort of flow chart that can sort of list all the goods that and when they come in and what the different phasing is, and I can put that in the chat if that's helpful, so everyone can see what goods are required and when they need to be checked, etc. So I'll do that now.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I think we've
hello. I think we've got some. Nope. Have we got our Polish colleagues joining us again? Apologies all for the technical difficulties we're having this afternoon. If not,
I think I did just see Pavel join, so hopefully he is able to mute. Sorry. Are you there?
Nope, we'll move on. There is a question.
Excuse me, we missed a couple of last minutes, so we do not know what the question was. Okay. So we will now start to join and answer the questions that are asked.
Perfect. Thank you. We didn't have too many questions, but there was one about submitting certificates in Traces NT. Should notification in Traces NT be done by the exporter in the EU, and or should it be the responsibility of the UK importer?
For exporter from EU.
Yes, that's the question, as I understand it. Yes.
And the exporter of to EU is responsible for announce to district veterinary officer, and the district veterinary officer is issued Traces NT.
I see. Okay. And there was a question about whether export health certificates should be applied for through Traces, or should they apply in another way, or are they just issued on paper?
Okay, so basically how it works at the moment, the person who wants to have a health certificate need to go to district veterinary officer, and they will then guide them how to do the whole process, because it's still not clear if it will be in Traces or how it works. So basically they need to go to the district veterinary officer and they will guide them.
Thank you. Thank you. That's very helpful. There was a question about why is moving fish so complicated? But that's a big question. And I wonder if you wanted to cover off the requirements there, or we could just point to the guidance on fish and try and help people through it to make it less complicated. We'll come back to that. Okay. I had another question about goods that will transit through from the EU through GB and perhaps onto Ireland using the land bridge. Would documentation be required for SPS goods moving through what we would call the land bridge? That is, say, coming from a port in the EU, in the Netherlands, France, Belgium, and then through GB and onto Ireland. What SPS documents would be required there? If my colleagues in DEFRA could summarise those very quickly, that would be lovely.
Thanks, Margaret. I will hand over to one of my products of animal origin colleagues to add a bit more detail there for you.
Hi, Margaret. Thank you. I think my understanding is that the goods will require a health certificate and that they will still need to have a GB-based entity, even for goods moving through the UK. But we can provide more information in detail in the follow-up to in the questionnaires.
Thank you very much. I think we have covered all of the questions that have come in, and I'd just like to thank all of our presenters for a lively Q&A session and for all of their presentations. Before I come on to the next slide, please, which is, if I remember correctly, our guidance towards, we're pointing you towards general guidance for borders in GB. So there's the border operating model was updated over the summer. We have published a haulier handbook, and that is being translated into a number of languages, including Polish. So please do go and have a look on that. That's a nice step-by-step guide for moving the goods. We're continuing with our programme of events. We focused today on moving food and drink. We will be back, and we're working with the British Embassy to deliver another day for you in Poland that will cover the customs procedures and wider procedures that you want. So please do come and join us for that. Keep an eye out for those events. And do give us your feedback. On our final question in Slido, we've asked whether you've understood more about moving goods into GB and the EU. But if not, please do tell us what more you need to do so we can shape and make sure the material is correct. So thank you very much for joining us this afternoon, and a big, big thank you for those who've opened the event for us, and to all of the officials in Poland and GB for joining us this afternoon and covering all those very technical matters. And we will publish the details and share the questions and answers with you. Thank you.